Hi everyone, welcome back to State of the Union US Women's National Team Edition Part 2. In Part 1, which is in the description box down below, we recap the first half of the year. Now, we approach the World Cup and the second half here in Part 2, so let's get into it. So let's set the scene. We're going into this tournament with a lot of injuries. Sauerbrunn is gone in the back, Macario, Uswnt, Purvis, Dahlkemp are all gone, and Lavelle is questionable. So we go into that first game against Vietnam, and on paper, that is our easiest game of the group stage. For goal difference, we need to knock that game out of the park. We score 3 goals. At this point, it's a win, it's a clean win, but people are not satisfied, and that's because tons of opportunities were missed, and it was more a question of where is that US team from 2019 that scored 13 goals against Thailand? So they shake it off. There's still 2 more games to go, but we approach the Netherlands. That is the hardest game of the group stage. What they do here matters. I remember that first half being incredibly upsetting, especially the Jill Roord goal, which was just caused by so many mistakes. I think the US, to their credit, pulled it back in that second half of that game. We had one moment of brilliance in it. That was fueled by Horan because of her skirmish with Vandendonk. But we can't rely on moments like that to fuel an entire offense. The US needs more. It was honestly the same story against Portugal, except worse. If you guys have watched the new Under Pressure documentary about the US Women's National Team, you will know Vlatko said to go out there and score goals. And in this 0-0 draw, the US did exactly the opposite. They were completely neutralized, especially in the wings. Players like Sophia Smith could do absolutely nothing. And Portugal nearly scored at the end in one of the most horrific moments in soccer, personally. I think the US got a lot of criticism rightly for things like celebrating when they barely made it into the round of 16, but I think they knew it wasn't cutting it. Specifically, Vlatko was clearly being tactically outdone, and it was a wake-up call that other nations are catching up, and to be able to be big on the international stage, you need to be willing to take risk, and that's something he wasn't doing. So I ultimately think the way that they came into this round of 16 match was the US I was hoping to see. Such an utterly dominant performance that it hurt so much that no one had the clinical finishing ability to put this match to bed. I think the US has some really great attacking players and that have great potential ahead of them, but they weren't able to show up in these big moments. Alex Morgan did not score at all in this tournament, and Sophia Smith, I personally believe, is very underutilized at a national level. She plays 9 for her club, where I think she is much more effective. She's not as good on the wings. Defensively, I think the game against Netherlands was disappointing, especially that goal, but the Germa-Ertz combo was one of the best things in this tournament, and I'm really sad to see Ertz in retirement because I think that would be fantastic for the US. We also did not see Alana Cook at all this tournament, even though there was a lot of talk about her before, so maybe the US is now figuring out that new center back pair, especially after losing Sauerbrunn and Ertz, who had been 2 anchors of this team. Okay, so we now jump to September when the US played 2 friendlies against South Africa. They definitely performed with 2 shutout wins, 5 total goals, but the margin of dominance is always questionable to me. Could the US team of the past have scored more goals? They always seem to pick easier friendly matches, so they win, but how much should they be winning by? We also had 2 send-off games for Rapinoe and Ertz, 2 crucial players to this team. They will be big losses. In addition to this, we saw Kilgore now starting to mix things up right after Vlatko had left the team. We saw Tierna Davidson and Casey Kruger come back into this team, and we saw Sonnet take a more dominant role after her really good performance against Sweden. So now we jump to the end of October, and the US played 2 friendlies against Colombia. The first one was a 0-0 tie, and people were upset. They were like, we're going back to the mistakes of the World Cup. The inability to score goals is really hurting us, and Alex Morgan was specifically targeted as she still wasn't able to score any goals. In that second game, it was a 3-0 win, fueled by the goals of younger players like Jaden Shaw and Mia Fischel, and this really started this push for the infusion of new younger players in the US offense. Kilgore starting to take that risk paid off, and that's something she would continue to do through the rest of the year. So finally, we reached December when the US played their last 2 matches of the year, 2 friendlies against China. This roster looked a lot different than the rest of the year. We saw goals from Sam Coffey and Jaden Shaw, 2 new players making their mark. We also saw uncapped players like Jenna Neiswanger and Corbin Albert join the team. I'm going to start with some positives. I think the US was taking shots, maintaining possession, winning the ball back immediately after a loss of possession, showing that they're starting to gel a lot more. I also think Germa and Horan are 2 players I want to really recognize from this year. Great defending from Germa, great assuredness for such a young player. Horan, such a good captain, I think, and has great leadership skills as well as consistency for the team. The US is definitely taking steps to solve its issues, but I don't think they're completely fixed. In that second game, China responded a lot better. Their defensive shape with 5 in the back shut out the US in the first half, and when China had that one opportunity, they were able to capitalize and scored. And I think this takes me to one of my overarching takeaways, which is that you can't always rely on your defense to be perfect 100% of the time. The offense has to step up and convert the opportunities they get. And the reality is that the US has been pretty wasteful with their opportunities this year. And my question is this a new thing or is this something that's happened for a while? And I think that specifically this year has been kind of like a Jenga tower. The loss of key players early in the year, such as when you pull a block out of the tower, has really revealed that the team has some existing structural issues. And I think Kilgore and Emma Hayes will believe reinforcing that over the next year is going to be the most important thing to focus on. The question is, will these new players bring that reinforcement? It's so obvious that we're ending this year differently when we started it. So will veteran players earn their spot back after injuries as well, or will new players prove that at this point they're more valuable? We will have to see. Ultimately, I think this team has gone through so many ups and downs, maybe more than the US has gone through in much of its history, but like any team going through generational change, eventually you'll have to rebuild, and this gives them the best chance of success at the CONCACAF Gold Cup and the Olympics next year. Okay, that was quite a bit of reflection, but I hope you guys enjoyed my part 2 of this US Women's National Team recap. Please consider subscribing and liking to join me on this soccer journey, and I hope to see you guys next time.